Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe during this time of coronavirus. I have lots of yarn at home, so I've made a scarf on my Zippy Loom, even though I don't plan on going outside at all for several days. I've used the zigzag stitch, and I hope you find this tutorial helpful. I'll be showing you, number one, how to put the yarn on your loom with a figure eight cast on. Number two, how to do the zigzag stitch. Number three, how to add a new ball of yarn. And number four, how to bind off, which means we remove the scarf from the loom. For the supplies, you'll need 3 balls of yarn. I've used Lion brand Boing, 4 Zippy Looms arranged in 2 rows of 8 pegs, a piece of scrap yarn to be your anchor yarn. You need scissors, a hook, and optionally a yarn needle or crochet hook. So let's get started. So to cast on, we're going to begin with a slip knot. You make a loop in your left hand and you grab some yarn from your right and you're going to tighten it to make a small loop. You're going to place this yarn on the top left peg of your Zippy Loom. Let's continue with our figure eight cast on by wrapping the next top peg counterclockwise and then the bottom peg clockwise. And we will continue to make these figure eights until we get to the second last pair of pegs. We're going to be working the top 6 pegs and the bottom 6 pegs only. So we won't be touching the very, very first pair of pegs and the very, very last pair of pegs. So at the last pair of pegs that you're working, you're going to make the yarn go in a straight line along the inner side of those pegs, and then you're going to go to the top peg, and you're going to wrap it in order to make figure eights that match up with the figure eights that you have just completed. So you're just retracing your steps, making new figure eights on top of the old figure eights. So at the last pair again, you're going to be putting your yarn in a straight line, and then you're going to take your hook because you're going to knit over the bottom loops. So that means that you just take the bottom loop and you bring it over the peg towards the middle of your loom. So you're going to knit over those 6 bottom loops. Make sure you grab those 2 strands since we're working with double strands here. On the bottom row, the first peg is going to be empty, so that's okay. That's to be expected. So just knit over those 5 bottom loops. So now we've cast it on, but we want to tighten it up. So we're going to look at those knots in the middle, and then we're going to pull them from the left side, and you're going to pull that extra yarn upwards. So just go kind of knot by knot, working from right to left. Continue to bring that extra yarn upwards. We want to get rid of that slack because that way we'll have a nice bottom edge to our scarf and we won't have to tighten it up later at the end of our project. So here I'm going knot by knot, and I'm soon going to be at the very end and I won't have anything else to pull upwards. So this means that I'm going to remove the slip knot from that very first peg. I'm going to pull it towards the left, and I'm going to take with me all of that extra yarn. To secure things now, just for good measure, I'm going to tie 2 knots. So I'm using my slip knot tail and my working yarn. And then I'm going to just lay that slip knot tail across my loom. And then I'm going to cut it. You don't have to, it's up to you. I'm going to cut it, and then it's just going to get woven in later as I work my scarf. So now you want to get your piece of scrap yarn that you're using as your anchor yarn, and you want to lay that across your loom. And with the ends, you want to poke them through the hole in the middle. And later, what you're going to use it for is to help push down your project to help it go through your loom. With this Zippy Loom in particular, the hole in between, or it's like a little male slot between the two rows of pegs, is pretty skinny. So that yarn is going to help you move things down as you make progress. So now that we have completely cast it on, we're going to push down all of the loops, and this will make room for row 1. For the zigzag stitch, you're going to go from wrapping the top peg to the bottom peg, but you never completely wrap the pegs. Instead, you're wrapping along the outside of the pegs, so you don't make any figure eights at all. The last peg that you wrap is going to be the bottom left peg. So I'm just going to hold my yarn kind of tight across the top of the loom. And with the hook, I'm going to knit over that bottom loop. So on that bottom row, I have 6 loops that I'm going to be knitting over. And I've got to watch out that I don't, that the loops don't slip off. So I'm going to continue knitting over those 6 bottom loops, making sure to grab the double strands. And then on the top row, as an exception, I'm going to have 6 of them, six bottom loops to knit over. But you'll see in future rows that the second time that you knit over loops, you're only going to see 5 because of a slip stitch or a stitch that we are skipping. I'm pushing things down now to make room for the next row. And then so I'm going to start wrapping again. So again, I'm wrapping along the outside of the pegs, and I'm not doing any figure eights. So there's no crossing over of the yarn. And then the last peg that I'm going to wrap is going to be the top left one. So I'm going to hold the yarn kind of tight downwards until I can lock that loop into place. Okay, so now that's secured. So I'm knitting over those 6 loops. I'm just bringing those bottom loops towards the center of the loom. And then when I knit over on the bottom row, as you can see, I just have 5 bottom loops to knit over. So I'm going to push down all of the loops. And then we're going to continue with our zigzag stitch by again wrapping the outside of the pegs. So the last loop that I'm going to wrap is going to be the bottom left one. I'm going to hold that yarn kind of tight until I can knit over that bottom loop. Now things are securely locked in, so I'm going to continue knitting over those bottom loops. And then at the top, I'm going to see that I've got 5 of those bottom loops that I need to knit over and bring them to the center of the loom. Then we just push down the rows to make room for another row of the zigzag stitch. So I also wanted to mention that I learned some of these techniques here from other loom knitters. I first learned the zigzag stitch in a book called Loom Knitting Primer by Isela Phelps. She calls it the simple stitch, and I've also heard it called the fashion stitch. As for the Titan cast on, I learned that from videos from Kimberley, Carrigan, and from CinDWood Crafts. So thank you to these loom knitters and to the loom knitting community. Now, as you make progress, you can use the anchor yarn to push things down to make room for more rows. So I have fast forwarded a bit to show you this small bit of video because I want to show you what this looks like. As you can see, I'm using it to make room for new zigzag rows. So I think at this point you can keep knitting on your own. We'll meet again when you run out of yarn, and we will add new yarn together. So see you soon. So it's time to add new yarn because I ran out of yarn on one of the strands. So I have the original yarn on my left and I have the new yarn on my right. So I'm going to find a knot towards the center of the loom. So I'm going to put the original yarn under the knot just around the second peg along the bottom. And then I'm going to bring it upwards, and I'm going to take the new yarn and I'm going to tie a knot right over left and then left over right. And then I'm going to tighten it up, preferably tighten up all 4 strands and kind of keep it close to the peg. Here I'm doing a 3rd knot just to be extra sure. Then I'm cutting off both tails so I don't have to weave them in later. And then I'm going to continue with my zigzag stitch as per usual. So this is how I personally add my yarn. I think now you can knit on your own now that you've seen how I add my yarn. I'm going to just knit until my 3rd ball of yarn runs out. So let's meet again to bind off together. I'm going to bind off using my fingers. So I remove the top right loop and I remove the bottom right loop, and I put the top loop into the bottom one and I pull that loop upwards. Now I'm taking the next bottom loop and I'm putting it inside the working loop. I'm pulling it upwards, and I'm getting the next top loop and I'm putting it inside the working loop, and I'll pull that upwards as well. Then I'll move to the next loop on the bottom row. I will pull it upwards. And so now I'm taking the next top loop and putting that inside the working loop, and then I'm pulling it upwards. And now I'm going to just work my way towards the left until I reach the last loop. I had practiced this bind off a few days ago when I made a small swatch. I always recommend doing small swatches before starting a bigger project. That way you can practice casting on and binding off, and you can see in advance how tightly or how loosely you need to be knitting. So now we're finally taking off the very last loop from the loom. So we can see that really nice braid that we've created there. So the next thing we're going to do is pull the tail through that very last loop. If you have some extra yarn, of course, you can cut off and leave about 6 inches or so. Then you're going to remove the loom from then you're going to remove the scarf from the loom, and you're going to have a nice look at your work there. And next, you're going to need to deal with that end. So I'm putting 1 strand through the scarf so that I can make a knot just to secure things for sure. So after I've made my knot, I'm going to weave in those tails through the bottom edge of the scarf. So I'm first trying it out with a crochet hook, and then I'm finding it just to be easier to use my fingers. And then I'm going to work towards the center of the scarf. Now, this type of yarn is pretty forgiving. That's what I like about this Lion brand Boing yarn. When you're tying knots or weaving in the ends, you can't really tell. Like here, I'm just doing a knot with the 2 different strands, and then I'm going to cut off the ends, and no one will be able to see that. So then I'm going to find my first edge. That's the cast on edge. So this is pretty easy. I see my anchor yarn there. So all I need to do is just pull it out. And as for that slipknot tail, it's already been woven in. So since this yarn is pretty forgiving, I'm just going to do a nice knot there, tie it, and I'm going to tighten all 4 strands. I'm going to cut off the ends, and then I'm going to call my project done. So I hope you've enjoyed this zigzag scarf tutorial. We're in a strange time now with COVID-19. Maybe you can get a chance to do some loom knitting if you're spending a lot more time at home than usual. Thank you for watching, and stay safe.